Alright, welcome back to Game 10 of Lucid's 2022 tournament, where we are playing Phlegra. It is turn 15, and I think this one is going to be a quiet one for us. Yeah, we do take something from the Independence, fingers crossed. We also finished research on Conjuration 4, headed to 5. We were planning on waiting to attack Xibalba until we hit Conjuration 5, but we have gotten some diplomatic information from Midgard that they have won a major battle against Xibalba and killed quite a few of their forces, so we'll probably actually jump the gun early. We do need to do a little bit of forging, and we're not really in position yet, but we should move sooner rather than later. But also, it looks like Midgard has been attacked by Utgard, so I'm not sure how much Midgard is going to be able to take advantage of their victory. On the other hand, I do think Midgard would be a really useful ally for us long term. So, you know, we may, I don't know if we're going to leave the capital for them, but we're definitely going to leave at least some territory for Xibalba, considering also that Midgard did, it looks like, at least from the report, most of the lifting. You know, we'll see what kind of forces Xibalba ends up having left. We are also, our other possible target at the moment, well, I guess technically also Raga. We haven't officially signed anything yet, but we've been pretty friendly with them, so not really looking in that direction just yet. But Atlantis is the other possibility, although we also have not a large border with Ulm now, but there's a throne that Ulm has taken and is in play, and Ulm is somebody that we haven't actually really had any contact with yet, so that's another possible way we could pick up some territory. Anyway, all this to say that, you know, we don't necessarily have to take all of Xibalba to put ourselves in a decent position, and, you know, long term I think Midgard would, you know, like I said, be a good ally. They are probably the favorites to win the game, so maybe there's something to be said for, you know, trying to help put them down, but generally I don't really like ganging up on players anyway. And they've also been pretty friendly, of course. Then again, so is Xibalba. You know, there's only one winner, so we're gonna have to fight people. Right, we're just pinging. This is an untaken throne that's relatively close to us, so yeah, as I thought, we don't have any real battles this turn. And this is not looking particularly scary, right? The mundane troops are pretty whatever, although, you know, we pretty much just have crossbowmen, and we'll have fire elementals, but this sorceress not looking very scary. Low pathing. There's a priest here. Yeah, there's only 2 sorceresses. Okay, this sorceress looks a lot worse. Death 3 is not great with a boatload of death gems, and then this could be air elementals, so maybe not a complete pushover throne, but not looking super scary. Which also means that other people are likely looking at this throne and will want to move on that sooner rather than later if we do want to try to take it. On the other hand, we kind of want to move against Xibalba like I just discussed, so we may end up leaving that to Atlantis. And then this is Calum, who I really don't know a lot about in the late age. It looks like it's just their mundane troops. Yeah, some Spire Horns, which is pretty normal. These Raven Guard are new. They're also stealthy of note, but otherwise look, you know, pretty standard bird troops, more heavily armored than most birds, but yeah, mostly just bird stuff. Like, yeah, this looks like all mundane troops, and they are just going after some province, probably that they lost to an independent attack, since it's a bunch of villains. And like, yeah, that's a ton of birds. Definitely more birds than you'd need to deal with villains, so possibly they're thinking about, you know, using this force to launch an attack somewhere, or, you know, they're planning on just hanging out and they don't really have a need to be using their armies at the moment. And then we have an unexpected event in Phlegra. We lose a bunch of population. This is unfortunate. I mean, I don't know. You lose a bunch of population anyway in your capital as Phlegra, so that's, you know, kind of part of why I went heavy misfortune, but this is part of the cost of it, and it is sad to be losing this population, you know, even earlier than normal. And speaking of misfortune, we get some misfortune here. This looks like one of our nicer provinces, so we may want to try to go patrol that down. And then I think we are ready for this barbarian attack, though, other than, you know, the fact that it makes us sad. Yeah, so we're patrolling here with some of the crossbowmen that we've been recruiting. And luckily there's been no yellow mold on top of our capital yet, so we do actually have our full starting province defense. Our PD is not great, especially since we get these short bows, but barbarians are still susceptible to short bows in the late age, so we're able to rout them without too much difficulty. Let's just make sure, yeah, we don't lose anything that we can't afford to, and I will catch you guys after the jump. All right, this is the situation and what we did about it, recording this from the future with all the normal caveats. We are definitely thinking about our war with Xibalba, planning on jumping in on this, definitely. Doing a little bit of forging to support that, a fire plate. We are planning on sending in some of our Cyclops Smiths. Unfortunately, right, of the 4 that we've recruited so far, 3 of them have been the less useful randoms. One of them is an Earth random, which is better, but still not ideal for raiding. Still, we're going to go through with it, and some of our recruitment is focused around that, so we're going to use some of these Cyclops soldiers as bodyguards. Still trying to squeak out a few crossbowmen here, and then our other recruitment is towards Mouflon, since we do want a bit more of a front line. We still, we have a decent number of Mouflon and a decent number of crossbows, particularly if we bring our group of crossbowmen, from the capital forward. So it's not that we have nothing, but, we don't have a ton yet. Of course, we don't have Conjuration 5 for fire elementals, and we probably won't, at least for the start of this war, so we've actually gone for Enchantment 3, since with our level of research, I think that's something we can hit. I'm thinking that what I must have been planning on was Strength of Giants, which I do think is a pretty good upgrade for our troops, and definitely something we can cast, although a little less useful on crossbowmen, but our Mouflon are definitely going to like this. And probably also starting to think that, depending on how everything shakes out, right, like those giants are definitely a concern. So while we don't really need Strength of Giants against Xibalba, we could very well need it against the giants, and it's something we can cast and that we can hit from a research standpoint, so that's what we're going for. Otherwise, still headed for those full-size fire elementals at Conjuration 5. That covers our recruitment and the majority of our plans. We are building a lab here. Our palisade will finish in 1 turn, so we're still not in a good place when it comes to infrastructure. Right? We still have 472 gold. We're actually starting to recruit some of these light infantry here, just to get some patrollers and some numbers. And, we haven't been able to spend our gold, despite the fact that, we lost a bunch of capital population this turn to barbarians. So our infrastructure still is not in a great place. In terms of what other people are up to, we do see a stack of stuff on Xibalba's capital, but it's not particularly large. They have some of their sacred frog troops here and some dart throwers, which I'm actually not too familiar with the dart throwers. But certainly Xibalba doesn't have nothing, but it doesn't really look like... That's not a very significant force. We don't see any other fortifications. They don't look very large overall, and we do see that Midgard is in their cap circle. So it is looking like Xibalba is a pretty appealing target. On the other hand, of course, Midgard has 2 of their cap circle provinces gone. I have clearly not quite cottoned on to how dire their situation was, but our scout is hanging out here. Not sure why Utgard didn't choose to attack this turn, but we're keeping an eye on it. We're at least aware of the fact that Midgard could be under duress. Just not quite, or rather haven't quite realized how dire their situation is. I'm not sure Midgard actually has any forts at this point. Otherwise, we don't know a ton. We do see a fairly significant stack here on our border with Atlantis, which is a little concerning. But, considering we haven't committed yet, that's fine. We would not want to fight all these Ice Guard in the cold where they're going to have really high protection. But, we have Heat 3, so it is going to kind of suck for them to invade. But of course, if they were to pick up this throne, then that's going to push their dominion pretty heavily, which is going to be a problem for us. So this other throne up here, also neutral, so definitely something to consider. Yes, we want to pick up Xibalban territory, but these thrones are pretty important for us, particularly this throne that's going to be on the border with Atlantis, where we have temperature differentials that are very important to both nations. We see a little bit of recruitment from Ulm, recruiting some indie crossbowmen, which at first I thought was not a great idea since they have Rangers of Ulm, which are their national crossbowmen, but those are actually fairly expensive, 12 gold apiece versus, the average 10. So I'm assuming these are 10 gold apiece, and it's probably why they're going with them. Otherwise, we don't know a whole lot about what Ulm is up to. Similarly, with Micklin, we're not totally sure. We saw that force from Xibalba. This is the location where those birds jumped in. Trying to do some more scouting of Kalem. But we still don't know a ton about them, and Marignan is basically a complete question mark for us. We did find Vettiheim's capital, no great feat considering how mapnuke maps are laid out. But it is of some interest, and we do see that Vedheim has another fort up in a forest, which makes sense for Vedheim, and it's right next to a throne. So, keeping an eye on that. I think we managed to get a scout, on like this independent throne down here between Atlantis and Utgard. So we're definitely going to want to continue to get our scouts onto thrones or near thrones so we can keep an eye on the game state at large and like what wars are developing. But, it's still a little light at the moment. We are recruiting, more scouts, definitely. Not everywhere, probably. Yeah, actually, we are still recruiting a good number of scouts, which is probably warranted. I think that more or less covers turn 15. Alright, welcome back to Game 10 of Lucid's 2022 tournament, where we are playing Phlegra. It is turn 16, and we have chatting with Midgard a little bit. We saw that attack on Midgard from Utgard. Speaking of, there's a battle in Midgard itself. This is pretty important. And Midgard thinks that this game could be over relatively quickly. They think that Utgard is going to be going for a throne rush, and they also feel that they were probably the only one that could stop them. I don't really know how true that is, but I certainly could see going for a throne rush. Utgard has gone for a very strong bless, so they're probably not interested in this game going long, and whether or not anybody else can handle them, I don't really know. Obviously we're not feeling particularly strong, but we were planning on attacking Xibalba. We also don't really have any border with Utgard, so there's not a lot we can do at the moment to stop this. We have seen this army. There's a little bit of mage support here. Looks like she's just doing some body ethereal. It's just the one mage, so I guess she's just here maybe to make sure that the prophet doesn't die, because I can't imagine she's going to be able to do that much body ethereal spam to make much of a difference. And it looks like Midgard chose not to defend here. It's kind of interesting. I thought it said in Midgard, but I could have been wrong on that, because this looks like not Fort PD. So we'll have to double check the province that this is happening in. But yeah, there's definitely not enough PD here to stop these guys. Let's double check the bless. I just need to remind myself. Yeah, this is definitely pretty nasty. Regeneration, always important, particularly on giants. Although these aren't full-size giants, so it's not going to be as nasty as it could be, but then when you combine that with the blood bond to spread the damage out, it's going to be rough, plus fortitude, so they're going to be taking less damage to begin with. Definitely a very strong bless, and then they also have shock resistance covered. No fire resistance covered, so that's good news for us, since we definitely do more shock damage than fire damage. They're not going to love getting trampled by air elementals, but they do have magic weapons, so they're going to be able to kill those. We won't be able to summon enough air elementals to overwhelm this number of sacreds. And then the other thing that we're planning on doing, fire elementals, they're not going to love all this magic weapons either, and with the blood bond and the regeneration, we would need quite a few fire elementals to really make a dent in these guys. Let's see, their protection is relatively low though, so without any fire resistance, they will be taking a good amount of damage from fire elementals, and the fortitude won't really matter for the fire damage. So that at least is in the good news department, but yeah, these guys are really scary. We can watch them just absolutely roll over these poor guys. You can see they do take damage, right? But they're able to regenerate it back up without any difficulty. I don't think they took any losses there. One of their commanders did go down somehow, and they do lose a few long dead, but they don't really care about that. And 57 of these sacreds are pretty nasty. That said, that's got to be almost all of their sacred production, if not all of their sacred production for the game. This army can only be in one place at a time. So, if the entire room worked together, it may be time to, start chatting with some other players, especially some of Utgard's neighbors. Are they going to be able to cover enough locations? Yeah, you won't be able to beat this army, or it's going to be extremely difficult to beat this army, but Utgard's not going to be able to put together that many of them. Then again, I am used to much larger games and longer games, so I do need to be careful. Throne rushing and preventing throne rushing is definitely something I have a lot less experience with. So we're gonna continue to keep an eye on that, and this does say that it's in Midgard, so that's kind of interesting. Yeah, I'm not sure why they wouldn't have their fort PD here on their capital. The only thing that pops into my head is that possibly Midgard chose to burn down their fort if they felt like they, couldn't hold things. Yeah, I don't know. We'll have to take a look. We do find 2 magic sites with our pretender, so this is very nice. We haven't had a lot of luck so far in terms of site searching. Speaking of which, our other site searches do not work out. Then we have some unexpected events. These will not be good. Yeah, the burning mountain is rumbling. Don't worry, I'm sure it's fine though, but the people are unconvinced and there's some unrest. And then let's see, we get a gold donation, so this is very nice because people are convinced the world is ending. Probably correct. Let's see, yeah, some of our troops got cursed, which is fine. We get 2 nature gems, not that big a deal. We do finish our second fort, at least the palisade, so that is good news since we might need that sooner rather than later, and I'll catch you guys after the jump. All right. This is the situation and what we're doing about it. We will be prepared to attack Xibalba next turn. Not super confident in the raiding forces we're going to be using, but I am hoping that it won't be super obvious that we'll be attacking, and we won't really be facing any major province defense dumps. We're just going to be using some of our really expensive capital-only mages that are difficult to retreat. Definitely need to change the scripting on them when I actually attack. But the plan is to just be summoning a lesser fire elemental, and then we will also throw on a fire shield from enchantment 3, and we do have stone skin. So we'll be able to get their protection decently high. Their skills are pretty awful in melee, so really the plan is to just sit there with the fire shield, assuming that the lesser fire elemental, doesn't handle the province defense, which we're hoping it will, since it's going to be relatively light. Unfortunately, yeah, these guys can rain them in a fire too, which would be our most useful raiders, and I definitely got more of those in my testing, but of course, yeah, they are really random access, so we might actually slow down on these guys. I don't think they're going to be quite as useful as I was hoping, because yeah, we've been getting a lot of split path. The double earth guys are definitely nice, but we probably have enough of these guys, and yeah, they're just not going to be quite as useful as I was hoping. But yeah, we are going to use them right now, and hopefully it's just going to look like, we're getting site searchers on our borders, right? And Xibalba won't be expecting us to jump in. We are moving the majority, well, I mean, everything from our capital, pretty much all of our forces, other than our, random raiders, mostly crossbowmen, some Mouflon, into this fort here, and we'll probably actually go for this throne. We do need to start thinking about Utgard. Unfortunately, there's not a ton we can do. I do think they're a little ways off from a throne rush, so, I'm not discounting what Midgard is saying. I agree that, yeah, Utgard is well positioned, right, to rush for a throne. There's really no reason for them to wait, right? In some ways, like in the same way that I've been saying, we probably don't want the game to go long. Utgard probably doesn't either. However, you do need 6 thrones to win. They're all level 2 thrones, and you need 12 points. So we don't actually know exactly where Utgard's capital is, but I'm guessing it's about here, because we see their flag down here, their flag over here, and obviously they're making an attack to the north, and they've taken Midgard. So that means, right, in theory, they have this throne. So 1, 2, 3, probably 4. But from there, they need to kind of reach. Now, probably the places, since they're attacking into Midgard's territory, we can also see that it looks like Gath also got involved in attacking Midgard. So, Utgard would have to reach for both this throne and this throne. That could be a potential, 5 and 6, right? So they've got 4 relatively easy ones in theory. We do need to get scouts on this, like Gath may control this throne. Obviously, Atlantis is going to be interested in this throne. Raga is going to be interested in this throne. Fedheim and this one. So, this is making the assumption that Utgard is going to be able to defeat all of their neighbors for the thrones, right, without anyone actually getting in their way. Which again, I think this is probably the majority of their sacreds. Maybe not, but we know at minimum they don't hold this throne. They certainly haven't claimed any thrones that we know about. Now, they could still hold some of these other thrones and have just not claimed them. But anyway, I do think the possibility of a throne rush by Utgard is a strong possibility, and we would also like thrones. Thrones would be nice. We're kind of thinking that Atlantis might be our next war anyway, and the Dominion push is going to be really important because, you know, fire elementals in the cold, not as good, so if we can push our Heat Dominion into Atlantis's territory a bit, that will make our war a lot easier. And of course, having a throne is going to push a lot of dominions, so we're probably actually going to use our army to grab this throne first. I'm guessing that that's what this army is also planning on doing, so that might be the opener of our war against Atlantis. We'll see. Might try to engineer a bump. Maybe we'll let them come in first, depending on, you know, what kind of forces Xibalba has and how this war goes. Xibalba's capital is locked down but not cracked by Midgard, and we see, you know, a substantial force of mundane units and mercenaries here. So, you know, Midgard might not be out of it completely yet. Obviously, they, you know, do have at least one fort that we're aware of, but having burned down their capital, that's a pretty strong statement. I can't imagine this is going to work out for them in the long run. So while Xibalba is definitely in a lot of trouble, it's not impossible that, you know, they're able to fight back, which we do not want. So, you know, we'll see. We'll have to talk with Midgard and, you know, see where they're at in terms of Xibalba's capital. If they want to try to take it and hold it, we're fine with that. You know, we can try to hold this throne and make sure that Utgard doesn't grab it. The other possibility for this Atlantean force is that they're going to go for this throne, right, and then just leave this one to us, because depending on what their scouting is, I've got to imagine that all of Utgard's neighbors are going to be pretty concerned. I know I would be pretty concerned. I think, you know, had we started next to Utgard and they'd chosen us, we probably would have died. That said, sacreds like this are kind of why we went with the pretender that we did. So, you know, while our pretender certainly would not have been able to stop all these Gamherdings on her lonesome, they do not have great magic resistance. It's just 12, and so, you know, especially if we could get her like a Vine Shield or something like that, which we probably wouldn't have the research for early on, and it wouldn't take that many hits to kill her, and she's not going to repel them nearly as well, because they're much closer in size to her. But these guys will get petrified, you know, more or less the same as a lot of other sacreds, and so, you know, assuming that she would have some chaff around her that are going to take some of the hits, probably in the form of our crossbowmen. She could deal a decent amount of damage and, you know, really hurt Utgard. So that was kind of always the plan. You know, again, I don't think we would have survived, but since we did not start next to Utgard, we do have a chance because, you know, combining our pretender with fire elementals and, you know, possibly going for incinerate. Since alteration research is going to be something we're going to want for our tyrants, that might be the play. The other option is like some fire evocation magic, right? Because the fire elementals, like I said, are going to die pretty quickly because, you know, their main defense is being ethereal, and that's not going to matter against those Gamherdings. So I don't think we're going to be able to generate, you know, quite enough fire elementals to really take down a huge stack of those. And while our crossbowmen will be useful, and we may actually go up and grab flaming arrows first, because again, no fire resistance, so that will help quite a bit. And we want to go down enchantment anyway. Anyway, all this to say that, you know, we do have options, and we're going to have at least a little bit of time. I definitely am planning on reaching out to some of Utgard's neighbors. We're not even 100% sure. It looks like, I mean, it's Xibalba in the south here, probably soon to be Vettiheim, although a relatively small border. And then most likely Gath, who may not be inclined to attack Utgard. I mean, nobody is going to be thrilled about attacking Utgard because these are really nasty sacreds, so it's not going to be an easy war. It looks like Gath was, you know, already working with them. I'm not actually sure who the other player is in this column. I believe it must be Marignon. It's not exactly like an early game powerhouse, and probably also not in the best position to resist Utgard, but at minimum may want to chat with them and make sure that, you know, they're planning on or have already locked up some of their thrones that are on the border of Utgard, and just, you know, generally try to make them out as a boogeyman. Which at this point in the game, I think they definitely are. That's a legitimate concern. But, you know, in the short term, we're going to focus on raiding away some Xibalban territory, with our questionable raiders. We may split out like a Mouflon group or two. We probably won't press. We've only handed out one fire gem. Oops, that's the wrong province. Yeah, we've only handed out one fire gem to our raiders, so they'll probably just take one set of provinces. I think if they were to attack into some PD dumps, that could go quite poorly for them. So they'll probably just hang out in site search, or maybe consolidate in site search, and then just return to somewhere. We're thinking about like a fort here might be kind of nice. There's a decent amount of resources, and it borders quite a few other provinces that are going to provide good resources, and has a decent level of population. It's also next to a throne, so that's always nice in case we don't grab it. There's a pretty good chance that Raga already has this, or if we took it, they might feel strongly. So we'll see. Like I said, this is probably the throne we're going to focus on first. But anyway, we're not planning on pressing super hard or super deep into Xibalba's territory just yet. Really kind of depends, on what Midgard is going to do. If they are unable to seal the deal on Xibalba's capital, then we absolutely will send our army over in that direction and try to seal the deal for ourselves. But the more that we press into Xibalba's territory, the more overextended we're going to become. We do need to keep an eye on where this Atlantean army goes, and it will also give us a much larger border with Utgard, right? So we don't want to be Utgard's next target. We just want to make sure that we at least lock down any thrones that we can and prevent them from taking them. So yeah, I think that more or less covers turn 16. I have to say this game is going a lot faster than I was expecting. I'm used to larger games, and yeah, was not expecting Midgard to be knocked out this quickly.